Here's how they do it now.
I do have to say, projecting to all of you, every time I stand up in any kind of a given situation in my non-theater life, people are like, wow, you really know how to, you really speak loudly? Like, yes, it came from UCSC. So Susan, we're going to start with Susan as a story. We want to keep our story to really about a minute. And so as many of you would like to tell a little short Tom story, you're welcome to do that. And we will switch back to some of our people watching here from Zoom, from their homes around America. And so to tell stories as well. So, great.
So yeah. Susan.
Yes, here I am.
Yay.
Hi, everybody. I'm Susan Morgenstern.
Yeah.
Thank you. I was in Tom's first class in 75. And I then went on to sort of TA the next three.
Magnificently.
Thank you. Staged many of you in various shows along the way. I will try to be short, but I have a couple of stories I want to share. The first one is from before the musical theater class even was invented. So Tom, I found out in my sophomore year that Tom was coming to teach a course from, Tom Lehrer was coming to teach a course called Math for Social Scientists at Stevenson, and I was at Cal. And I was like, it's for me, because I didn't know how I was going to get my 3 science credits. So I went to class that first day, sat diligently. There were a lot, there were 100 people in that, crammed into that room that first day, all hoping for something different than we got. And Tom walked in, and someone said, give us a course of new math! And he stood very still and said, welcome to Math for Social Scientists, blah, 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 and he just started teaching the course. He just completely ignored it. Wasn't negative, he just ignored it. And everyone learned quickly that we were not to refer to that part of his wonderful work. He didn't want to talk about it at all. And so my first story right now is that setup. It's very quick. I took the course. I won't bore you with all those stories of math. And then I went away my junior year. I did my third year abroad in Italy. And that course was winter quarter of my sophomore year. Then I did my junior year abroad. Came back as a senior. And in the fall quarter, somebody was doing, one of the big theater mucky people was doing a show that they had put together, kind of an original show at College 5. Order.
Thank you.
And yes. And I was in the audience, and Tom had written a song for it. It was a musical. And I was in the audience, and I saw him from afar. And, I've been away now a year and a half, at least. And I walked up to him and I said, hi, Tom. And he said, oh, Susan, nice to see you. And I said, oh, you know so many people, and you teach so many students. I didn't think you'd remember. There's so many of us named Susan. He said, it's such a common name. And he said, yes, but Morgenstern is not. So I know you'll all relate to that moment. So, asterisk across the page, I was in the first class, very fortunate, that was co-taught, by his side was Bill Shipley, my Bill experience every day. I was a linguistics professor. And Tom had seen me direct a show, had identified me as a director, even I said, you are a director. And I said, no. Anyway, I just reversed Bill only wanted to do the first year. He didn't want to do it after that. And Tom asked me if I would teach them with him, and I was very gratified to do that. And this is now, I've now known him a couple of years. It's still taboo. I've been around when people ask about the old days. They just get a nice, chilly non-response. He doesn't scold anyone, he doesn't get angry, he just doesn't address it. It's as if he didn't hear you. And we were at the cast party for this class, last class. And we were all now very good friends, as we all were of Tom. He made us not just his students, but his friends.
His family.
And family. And I had a week before, in passing, I found that I could talk about it carefully. And I said to him once at the lunch, I was wondering, Tom, I was thinking about the song The Elements, and I wonder, when you do a song like that, we do you have a cheat sheet? Do you have to memorize it because you're playing it? You know, I just don't know. You know, it's just so interesting. He sort of was like, I don't know. And then at the party, we've all been singing duets. We've all had a few. We're all feeling really good. And Tom's at the keys, and we're playing duets, and now he's playing. And he looks at me across the room from the keys, kind of like this. Susan, he says,
Yeah. He says, remember last week when you asked me if I had to memorize the elements or if I would read it from a sheet music or a cheat sheet? Now everybody in the room is I'm like, yeah. He said, well, I had to memorize it. And then he played the elements. And everybody in that room reacted just the way you did. But and from then on, the dam had broken. And he was willing to like play his stuff. And great. And then including the children's songs that he was most proud of. He sang more and all that. And so those are my stories. And Yael Shai was in the room when that happened, and she kind of has to follow up to that story. So I'm going to pass it over to Yael.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, first year class. I think there's only 3 of us here. So I had to check in with Susan at the beginning of this event. So yes, my name is Yael Shai, but back then it was Jackie Shai. So if you knew me back then, I was Jackie. I had dark hair, and I had to check in with Susan to see if I had dreamed this or if it was real, that Tom got tipsy and played all of his songs. And we were just in heaven, but nobody had cell phones back then, and we did not get a chance to record it. So it's emblazoned on my mind. Thank you for that, Tom. The other story, quick story I wanted to share, happened years after I graduated from Santa Cruz, and I know that Rusty Frank is in Zoom land there. So Rusty Frank. So I've known Rusty for probably close to 60 years. We grew up together in the San Fernando Valley, same synagogue, and we both ended up at UC Santa Cruz. We kept in touch afterwards. And 1989, Loma Prieta earthquake. I'm living in Washington, D.C. Rusty's living in San Francisco in the Marina District. We had huge earthquake damage, and it affected telecommunications. Rusty, as many of you know, kept very close friendship with Tom. And somehow she reached me in Washington, D.C. I don't know how. She said, all the California lines are clogged. I can't get through to anyone. I thought I'd try you. I need to get a message to Tom. His condo in Santa Cruz has been damaged. I can't get through to him. I can't get through to anyone in California. I'm so glad I reached you. You need to call Tom. And I was like, I don't even have his number, and I don't know if he would remember me. She gave me his number. I called him up. I said, hi, I used to be Jackie Shai. He's like, Jackie Shai! So, yeah, he has such an amazing memory. So it was just funny that there I was in Washington, D.C., dealing with a situation from my friend Rusty in San Francisco, calling Tom in Massachusetts. The world is strange. And just one final thing. Thank you, Tom. I've continued to do musicals. I direct an improvised musical team called All That Jazz Improv. We make up Broadway-style musicals on the spot. And I credit Tom for that.
Next.
Yeah, do we have someone in Zoom land who wanted to share? Rachel, your hand is still up. I was just wondering.
Yes.
She'll do it. Do it.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
Yeah, so Rachel.
Just tell me when to start talking. Can every? Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. Can I start? Can you all hear me? Okay. So first of all, before I start, so I was in the class of 1985, and I just want to say somebody just said Amy Kane is in the crowd, and Amy was in my Tom Lehrer class with me, but maybe you can just come up. Oh, wow. So anyway, I think we are the only two from 1985, but it's great to see you. And Brian Torfay, even though I never met you, or you probably don't even know who I am, but I just want you to know that I saw you, I'm thinking it was you, in the Shakespeare Santa Cruz production of Comedy of Errors, and you were amazing. And I just wanted to, I didn't have any idea that you were in Tom Lehrer's class. So brotherhood and sisterhood there. So what I wanted to tell about just a few stories in no particular order about my continued connections with Tom over the years that just tickled my heart, and just have kept that connection since 1985 going. So one of the recent highlights of my recent life has been the discovery, and I wrote this to Tom in a letter. I married also an alum from the Tom Lehrer class who we met at Shakespeare at UC Santa Cruz. So Dave Quicksall is here as well. But so Tom Lehrer got our address somehow, and we wrote some letters back and forth a couple of times over the years. So these are some excerpts from a letter that that we wrote, and this was my little excerpts. So I have to say, Tom, one of the highlights of my recent life has been the discovery that you are not only still having an influence on the world through your music, but that you are capturing the imagination of and putting your mark on the world of rap music. Congratulations. I don't know if you know that the hip hop artist 2 Chainz sampled one of Tom Lehrer's songs, The Old Dope Peddler. And this was 2 Chainz did a song called Dope Peddler, and he sampled part of Tom Lehrer's song. So anyway, I wrote in my letter to Tom, congratulations on having your classic work, The Old Dope Peddler, sampled on 2 Chainz's searing hit, Dope Peddler. As the hipsters would say, that is lit, my dude. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that, oh, gads. So Tom, when he found out that that 2 Chainz was sampling his song and they had to ask him permission to use it. So in 2013, Tom said he was, quote, very proud to have his 60-year-old song sampled, and his response to the request to use the song was, quote, I grant you motherfuckers permission to do this. Please give my regards to Mr. Chainz, or may I call him 2, which I thought was the best. And that was just so Tom Lehrer, and I loved that. So here's another just short little story about Tom Lehrer and his, unbeknownst to himself, perhaps, influence on the world. When our daughter, Maya, was in 5th grade, she emceed her school talent show, and one of the acts was a boy in 4th grade. This boy had a fairly serious stutter, and he was extremely shy of performing and talking to people. But he performed the elements in this talent show. He got all the way through that song without a hint of a stutter. And so I wrote in this letter to Tom, so you can add, Tom, curing stutters to your list of great things I've done without my knowledge. And that was to Tom. And so here is one more little thing that started in the class, the 1980. So Amy, you will remember this. Tom famously had his knack was I'm hearing an echo, sorry. His knack was to find rhymes for really unusual words because he was such a great rhyming person and wordsmith. So he told us back in 1985 in class that the only word that he never could find a rhyme to was orange, but not in the orange with the East Coast dialect, which is orange, but the West Coast dialect, which is orange. So he did find a rhyme for orange, which he proudly shared with us in class, which was eating an orange and making love makes for bizarre enjoyment thereof. So that was the rhyme he had thought up, but he said he had never been able to find a rhyme for orange. And I, with my little brain, I took that as a challenge. I mean, if we had been on TikTok, this would be a TikTok challenge to find a rhyme for orange. And over the years, I burned my brain cells and I found a rhyme. And so I sent it to Tom in one of our letters. So here, after many, many years of burning brain cells, Tom, I have come up with a rhyme with the West Coast dialect, and I submit it to you now for your consideration. And class, I submit it to you for your consideration. Here we go. Sakura ordered an orange divan for a nap at 3:45 in Japan. That's the rhyme of orange. So anyway, this is my I just was so crestfallen when I found out he had passed, but I really was amazed at the depth and the breadth and the scope of how he stayed with me in my life, and I'm sure in all of yours. And I just knew that I had to be here today to continue that connection with everybody and with Tom, because I miss him terribly. And I'm so glad to be here today, everybody. Thank you.
And I have a story too, but I can.
Andrew?
Well, after that, I'm Andrew Cheeseman. Hi, Rusty. Everyone knows Rusty, apparently. My story is really short. When I auditioned, I worked at during the break. I worked really hard to learn all the words. I'm not so good with lyrics, but this song, it's a grand night for singing, and when I auditioned, I forgot the word, and I ended up la 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 la. I think I am falling in love, and afterwards, after the audition, I went up to Tom like, I forgot the words. He said, and Tom said, I can't make the decision. That's why I have a committee, so I can blame other people. But you know, try it again. And so I went back and got into the class finally. But I just thought it was, you know, how many classes can you audition a performing class for and forget the lyrics? That happened to you?
Got the damn words.
That's my little story.
I have to raise the can.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember Tom. Well, I don't want to be in profile with you.
I'll stay.
All right. Rusty. My name is Michael Shipley. I was in Tom's class in 1983, but oh God, I'm gonna cry. My dad co-taught the class with him that first year, and the way I first learned of Tom's existence was I came home from school and my parents were sitting in the living room listening to a record and laughing so much that I couldn't get them to tell me what they were laughing at. And then my dad got to be friends with Tom, which was wonderful. And so we got to see him socially for years and years. He once said that, he said to a mutual friend that Bill Shipley and I were engaged in an experiment to see how far into senility adolescence could be extended. It's wonderful to have my dad include you in that. I have a couple of just quick things that I wanted to say. During our cast party for our year, we did get to hear his songs, and we got to hear a pornographic version of Silent E. Which, again, I wish there were cell phones. But sadly, Josh Gilbert, who was in our year, passed away a few years ago. Tom wrote a beautiful little memorial for him, which I read at the memorial, and everybody was very moved. It was really lovely of him to do. Also, Deb Gold, who was a dear friend of mine, passed. She was in first year. And she just passed away last year. So they are here in spirit. They would not have missed this for the world. And then there was one other story that my dad told me, which was that he and Tom went out to lunch somewhere here in town, and the father of somebody we knew ran this restaurant. And very similar to Susan's story, as soon as they walked in, he said, "Hey, Tom, jump on the piano, play us some songs," in this deeply inappropriate way. And you know how Tom was about that. And he did say something, which was, there was apparently a moment of silence, and he said, "Not in a million." And my dad walked out. So the very last thing I'll say is that I got to work in Hollywood for about 25 years, and I met a lot of people who loved and adored Tom and were amazed that I had met him. And there were a lot of moving stories, but there was one fellow in particular, and I think this was characteristic of a lot of things that a lot of people said about him and how much he meant to them. And it was moving to me because it had, in a sense, very little to do with how funny those songs were. But this fellow found out that I knew Tom, and he pulled me aside and said, "I grew up in a terribly repressive family, in a terribly repressive part of the country. And I was despairing as a child. And I heard those songs. And it was like a beacon from another world. And I thought, somewhere out there, there are people who look at the world in a way that makes sense to me." And he said, Tom felt like a lifeline. So there's no punchline.
Okay, I think I'm next. Oh, hi, everybody. Yeah, so I wish I could be there. I ended up getting a cold, so I thought I would save infecting an entire legacy class of Toms and stay in my little room here. Anyway, first of all, I have to contradict Susan. I don't know if Susan Morgenstern is still there. I know she had to leave, but she said he was always very polite when you gushed about being a fan of his before knowing that he didn't talk about that stuff. So this was 1975, and I found out where his office was, and I went there, and he was sitting behind his desk, and I introduced myself and said, "I'm such a big fan of your records." And he looked up at me and said, "That was 20 years ago." And then looked back down, and I went, "Oh my God." And so I then hoped he wouldn't remember that moment. And I heard that he loved tap dancing, and I was a tap dancer. So surreptitiously, I started teaching a tap class at Cal College, which he joined. And then we became really good friends because we had something in common. Was I loved movie musicals, and he loved Broadway musicals. So we were this perfect little bookends for each other. And he did get me addicted to something, and maybe somebody else got addicted to these. They are called Energets, and he used to eat these all the time, and one time he gave me one, and I was hooked ever since. So I've been taking Energets, little candies that I have to send away from New York. Anyway, my last story was, I think, one of my favorites. He and I got to do a lot of things together. We went to Broadway shows together, movies. But one time, I think you all may remember this, that the first time we would see him again was at the auditions for his class. And so we'd all pile into that room, sitting on the floor, and it was just so cramped you couldn't even move. And I remember I had got him a present, and I had it in a manila envelope. And I saw him across the room, and I waved to him my manila envelope, and then he lifted up his hand and he had a manila envelope in his hand. And we walked over the crowd of people and exchanged these manila envelopes, and we pulled out the same exact piece of sheet music. And it was from the Marx Brothers, the Coconuts, and it was because we both loved This Inner Rhyme, which Jackie talked about before, about the rhyming, I think it was she. But this was, we both loved this rhyme. Down among the mangoes, where the monkey gang goes, you can see them do the, everybody in joyful chorus, the monkey doodle do. And so that's that. And I think the thing that we all comment, that he remembered us all, so it made us all feel uniquely special to him, which I think is, again, a great teacher's gift, and is certainly his gift. And every single year he would call me on my birthday, and then when he didn't call anymore, he would email me. And then last year, before he died, was the first year I didn't get an email, and I knew that day was coming. So I wrote him just saying how appreciative I had been all those years for our friendship and those calls and the emails. And he wrote back some funny, witty thing, of course, about his senility, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, now it's for reals. We don't get to hear from him. But as I like to say, I can always hear his laugh so clear. And maybe there's somebody in the room, maybe Brian, can imitate his laugh for us all. And that's it, folks. So me and my animals say hello and wish I were there in person.
I think this might follow on well from that one, but there's no punchline like Michael's. How's your focus?
You're good.
Okay.
It's bad, so it's perfect for you.
So one part of his work that we don't hear so much about, but that Rusty tracked down, was his corporate commercials. So a lot of big songwriters and Broadway people back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s made a lot of money doing corporates that the rest of the world never saw. One of my favorites is Tom did one for Dodge Cars, I think, where he's literally in a cowboy hat, walking through Western town with a rope, dragging an upright piano. And he walks into the town in the middle of a big shootout, and he sings a song about Dodge Cars. Rusty will like, Tom? Anyway, I was very proud and surprised to be part of one of his last corporate commercials. And it came about because Tom wrote a letter of reference for me, recommendation for my very first job. 1980, a little summer stock company in Cape Cod. Did a lot of Gilbert and Sullivan. And unbeknownst to me, so Tom was in Cambridge, and he would come down and saw, I think he came to see us do HMS Pinafore and another GNS. Unbeknownst to me, apparently Polaroid had been after him for years to do a commercial for them, using that Modern Major General, the Elements song. Mm-hmm. In short, in every field from cosmic rays to choreography, there's bound to be a way of using Polaroid photography. But Tom had said, look, that song makes no sense if I don't have a chorus behind me echoing the words. And they're like doing the budget, well, we can't afford it. So it apparently, and he refused to do it without a chorus. And that went on for apparently 5 years or something. He came to see us doing GNS, and he went back to Polaroid and said, I found a chorus you can afford. Bear in mind, we were being paid room and board for the whole summer. And so they did a deal where we'd have our Sunday was the sacred day off, but we would come into the theater for 4 hours or something, and we would each get $100. And so Tom sat down in the pit, this tiny, funky little barn at the theater. Tom sat down in the pit, and we had learned all the lyrics all week, and we did the first take, and Tom's in the pit playing it and everything. And the recording guy's like, just getting this thumping sound. So we just check everyone's shoes, and and put carpet down for all of us. And they did, like 4 times we went through this, and finally somebody spotted Tom's left foot. Reminding you that Tom was addicted to caffeine. And so they ended up with like a cushion and a carpet under his left foot because he couldn't stop. Anyway, that's the story.
Brian was 1979, I was 1980.
1975, 78.
Oh, okay. He was born in
78. Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
You can stand right up there, yeah, address the room, yeah.
The closer to the screen, the better, because we'll get.
I'm Jim Bernstein, 1980. I was going to talk about Tom's laugh. Everyone knows, I know Rusty, hi Rusty. Ed Kaufman. Ed Kaufman's there. All right, so I'll try to be quick. So obviously, Tom's class had a huge impact on me. I'm going to tell a quick thing that's going to come back later. So when I was in high school, I grew up in LA, and there was a guy at this weird little theater in West LA named Ivan Spiegel. It's to come back later, and he wrote a production called The Death of Dr. Faustus, and he didn't hire free high school students. I was 15. I did the lighting so that when we had no idea what we were doing, there would be 10 people in the audience, and then you'd have intermission, and we didn't know where we go. Oh, we missed the cue and all this stuff, and the people would be in the dark and all this stuff. It was terrible. It was awful show. Like intermission, you come back and there would be like 2 people left. Often the whole audience would leave. Okay, so that's this will come back later. So anyway, I was in Tom's class in 1980. It was an incredible experience for me, and I became friends with all these different wonderful people, and it had a huge impact on my life. And then Tom asked me, I was a biology major, and he asked me to be his TA for his math class, which I got to do, and that was really fun. And while I would come and we'd grade papers or whatever and chat, and he said, "Oh, this guy contacted me from Britain who wants to do this musical based on my show," and I'm kind of wondering if I should do it. It was Cameron McIntosh. It was so crazy. So I literally was like there when he just sort of mentioned some weird unknown producer, who of course became the biggest producer in the world. And then after the show went and happened, and it was a big tomfoolery, was pretty successful. And then he told me, "Oh, I have to deal with all this stuff, and I'm getting royalties, which is great, and all this stuff." And then they're shutting down some production of some guy who did an unauthorized production, some weirdo in LA named Ivan Spiegel. So it's that guy. What are the odds of that? It was the crazy death of Dr. Faustus guy. Was the one person in the country doing an illegal production. Tomfoolery. Then I just was talking about how sardonic, or worse than sardonic, Tom was about asking about his career. And I was with Tom in the audience of some event, and some friend of mine, who I remember, but I won't tell her name so she won't be embarrassed, came up to him and said, "Oh, Tom, I just wanted to say I'm such a big fan of yours." And he said some awful thing to her. and then she walked away, and I said, "Tom," and he said, "I really should keep you around more often." Well, sweet. And made me think, oh, maybe he does actually feel a little bad when he hurts people's feelings. And that was sweet. And then finally, Tom, for at least 15 years, called me every year on my birthday, which was so amazing and so incredible. And the last thing also, I was going to mention Josh Gilbert, who I knew very well. He was in Michael's class, who was a pretty good friend of mine, and he sadly passed away. And then also, I don't think probably many of you know him. There was a fellow in my class named Dan O'Reilly, who was a really sweet, wonderful guy. And I just wanted to mention him and think of him. He passed away quite a few years ago, and I just want to remember Dan. And anyway, thank you, Tom, for, from Santa Cruz. I came into Santa Cruz as a computer science major, section information science. And I thought I'm going to be a computer programmer. I'd probably be super wealthy if I had done that. I didn't really want to do that. And I really wanted to be a writer. And I think Tom's class and a few other experiences that I had, like being in Romeo and Juliet, Michael Shipley and I became writing partners. I think that turned me in the direction that I'm so glad I'm a millionaire. But I wouldn't have given it up. It really made me so happy to get to do that. So thank you.
Okay. I'm just going to follow on what she said, because I'm one of those persons who got the Tom reply. I'm just going to share that with you. I'm Deb Barker, class of 78, and I'm also one of those ones, or I was Debbie back then, Debbie with a Y, in case you got confused. I'm Deb. I was one of those persons who auditioned not once but twice, because I didn't get in on this one, and I got in on this one, and I can only remember my audition song, which was Lion Tamer, Wouldn't He Have to Finally Notice Me? It was like such a perfect song. Please notice me. And I got it. So that worked out fine. And I was a straight kid, a Navy brat, living up in Washington State, you know, living on base, military. I follow the rules and everything like that. My family, we moved to California, and I'm trying to remember when it happened, but my parents got some records that they would play all the time, and then they'd leave the house and I'd play them, and I knew all the freaking words, and no one else had heard of them, but I could play them in secret at home, and they were Tom's records. And my parents, these, straight people, were this fairly subversive, bombing and things like that. My dad was in the war, my mom protested the war. Anyway, so here I had all this exposure from these amazing records. Joni was telling me about when he was on TV. I completely missed that. Anyway, so maybe you remember Tom's stuff on TV. Lucky you. I finally get into Tom's class after watching my friends audition, and they get in, and I'm in this room, but in the audience watching. And finally I get in, and one day I walk up to, Mr. Lehrer, and I'm like, Tom, I grew up on you. I grew up on you, and he said, I am really sorry. So that's it. Back, and I was like, but I was thrilled to be there. So that's my story. You can survive a Tom victim.
That was the week that was.
Yeah.
So I was in class of 76. We did Gypsy.
What's your name?
Kevin Reese. And and there's the stripper song, right? Which you gotta have to get it. Now, the original cast, there was a trumpeter and a ballerina, I think, in the Broadway cast, whatever. But the three actresses who did, you gotta have to get it, had different skills, including Miss Joni, who, okay, we're gonna do this together. Okay, good. She played by, yeah.
Okay, guys.
And Hillary Carlos, the famous juggler, played Mazeppa. So, I just want to know, is there anybody else here who Tom wrote special lyrics for? Okay. So anyhow, Tom asked me, so Hillary could juggle. She had her thing, so he wrote lyrics for her. And he asked me, so do you have any? Well, I played violin as a kid. Okay, so I went out and bought a secondhand violin for $25. And I remember the Music Man, where everybody said, you could play da 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 da. Yeah, if you can hum it, you can play it. So I went up to that da 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 da. We did. And Hillary's. So anyhow, so he wrote the lyrics for me. But the part I didn't tell you over dinner last night. Fast forward to maybe 10, 12 years ago. I have a friend who travels in very famous circles, and we ended up at the Big Four bar at the top of Nob Hill in San Francisco for cocktails after the show with Rita Moreno and Len Carrier.
Sure.
And somehow, as often happens, after a couple of cocktails, this story came out, and I ended up singing my special lyrics to Rita Moreno. I went out for high bets, but I was set for life. It's clear that I will always get paid. I was in the room, and when I heard that, I went, oh, I am in the presence of a genius. And that was just amazing. Oh, and Hillary's, so Hillary ended up on the Gong Show, and she won the Gong Show because she was afraid to go on the show because she had to sing and she was worried about her voice. So she sang while juggling because that was her comfort zone. Tom wrote special lyrics for her. Go on YouTube, look it up. It's fabulous.
And on screen? Janet.
Say hi.
It's too big.
She has to lower her hand.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Doug Erdman. I was in the class in 1983, and I have 3 quick things to share with you. My mother last week turned 93, and she went to Wellesley, and in 1955, when she was a junior, for the junior ball, the entertainment was Tom Lehrer. So when she found out that I had auditioned and gotten into the class, she was very excited, and so she was able to visit here and see me perform and meet Tom. And for her birthday, I bought a copy of Tom Lehrer's song book, this music and lyrics, all of his songs. And I had everyone in our class sign it, and I had Tom sign it. And when I looked later, he wrote, "Dear Anne, any mother does is mother of mine." I guess that makes us brothers. And mentioned the body lyrics to Silent E. Of course, with the way Tom's mind worked when he was writing for children, he had piles of lyrics that his mind had handed him that were totally inappropriate. And I just remember him playing something for us. And my favorite one was, "You can turn your pop into the Pope." The third thing is I studied photography here quite a lot, and one of the things we learned was Ansel Adams' system of ranking from shades from black to white, and his idea that he would overexpose the film to let in more darks and then underdevelop it to squeeze everything together, and he figured he could get more out of film than he would otherwise. But there was no point in trying to do that overexposure, underdeveloped process unless you found something that was very contrasty. So I was out in the courtyard in Cal, and I was looking for the greatest difference in tone, side by side. And so I was looking around, and Tom was sitting there, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm looking for the place where the difference between black and white is the greatest." And he said, "Have you tried South Africa?"
Hello, everyone. My name's David Quicksall, and for some reason I thought I was in the class of '86. Maybe it was the '80s, '87, but I need Tom Lehrer's memory to remind me. But a couple of stories. One of them was I don't know if you remember that Tom took the performances very seriously, and he didn't appreciate people breaking character. And one of my favorite moments, it wasn't me, it was my cohort, one of the other classmates, Chef Chastain, very funny guy. We were doing Finian's Rainbow, and he was playing the leprechaun, and he had the line, "Every femme that flutters by," and he messed it up and said, "Every phlegm that futters by." And he started laughing at himself and, totally broke character. And Tom just gave him the biggest stink eye while that was happening. And he vamped until he was finished laughing. And then finally he kept going, and then Chef continued. That was just one of those little anecdotes from the class itself. Just to share a little bit of the legacy that Tom has had in my life. I'm still in the theater, still an actor. The very first lead I ever played was West Side Story at UC Santa Cruz. Michael Shipley was in that.
Hi, Michael.
And Rachel was in that. I played Tony, and the only way that I had the courage to even audition for that was because I had just done Tom's class earlier that year. and I auditioned with a song, The Begat from Finian's Rainbow. And the director, Michael Edwards, turned to Tom, I heard this later from Tom, he turned to Tom later while I was singing and going, "What the hell song is this?" And Tom was, of course, very proud of me. And he said, "Well, that's The Begat from Finian's Rainbow," and I did end up playing Tony. And Tom was was a consultant to the director, Michael Edwards, who the two of them were really great friends. And Tom was kind of a Tony whisperer to me. We would sit in the auditorium sometimes when I wasn't rehearsing or whatever, and he would just regale me with stories from his own memory, but also kind of commentary on the show itself and on the character. And I always believed that working with Tom was the best acting class I ever took. And it was the best acting class at UC Santa Cruz, even though it wasn't part of the theater curriculum. And all of the people who were studying theater there were clamoring to get into Tom's class because of what they knew it did. And I dabble in musical theater when I can professionally, and I always hold on to the memories of working with Tom because just as a performer, he gave me a certain amount of courage to get up in front of an audience and sing, which singing is not what I consider my forte. However, he made me believe I could do anything. And that was such a lasting gift that he gave to me. And I'm sure we all can relate to the gifts that he gave us. And I too remember the party at the end where we all got liquored up and he was like a whirling dervish on the piano, just taking requests and just ripping all those songs out. And it was like, I always felt like when I was there, it felt like a fever dream. Like he was just releasing all of this stuff from himself. And it was such an amazing thing to witness. And we also, Rachel and I both would get correspondences from him over the years. And but he will continue to be a presence in my life. I think of him all the time. And as a performer, I always just hold on to how empowering he was to the people who worked in that class, making you feel you could sing and perform and do all those things and not feel judged or anything like that. It was a really, really valuable place to learn the craft of acting, even though that's not what the class was about. So I just thought I'd share that.
Yay, all right. So we have time for just a couple more. So
Okay, hi, Rachel and David. Okay. Rachel, David, Joe Paul Hemus here. I haven't seen you in decades, and it's so great to see you. I just wanted to share the acting class, Tom's acting class, because I also stayed in acting, and he taught me about timing.
Yeah.
His timing was impeccable. And so Jenny and I were in this Little Me, which was a Sid Caesar vehicle, and the three of us were in that little room in Cowell, a music room, where we would practice, and this was the biggest tip on timing. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to be good at the timing now, but he, I had this character that was a German director teaching the character, like, you're not using that knife, you use it and then you stab your head. And then Tom says, wait for it. Wait, turn to your left. Turn to your right. Look at her. And he just starts laughing. They're like, wait, keep waiting. Now. Oh, boy. And then just two more little things. So they were showing Carmina Burana that year, and one of the students from our class was in it. So he went to see. I mean, he was probably going to see it anyway. But he goes up and he says, "Oh, Joe, you've heard this? What?" He was like, "You say Carmina, I say Carmana, you say Verena, I say Verana, Carmina, Carmana, Verena, Verana. Let's call the whole thing forth." My last little thing was, you also heard the dirty silent E in his class. You guys started a tradition that he kept up where he would play us all. You know, we were in 87, so he kept that up and we got to hear his songs. Thanks to all of you encouraging him. But anyway, I was with another student and a joint came out. And so it was like, oh my God, you know, with my professor. And so, you know, the joint's going around and then he says, well, if I must. Anyway, I got to watch the Tonys with him a couple times in his house.
Oh, wow.
And he served us sushi, you know, like Tom Lehrer serving, you know, just the way he treated his students. It's just like this genius treating you like you were his equal, you know, when we all know we were not his equal. So anyway, I have great friends from that class that I still in touch with, and people like David and Rachel, I think of you all the time. I love you. Chef, if you're there, I love you. Gary Shapiro, I love you. Those are lifelong, cherished moments we've shared.
Love you, Joe. Oh my God.
Okay, this is our last one. No, after you. No, you are the last.
My name is Sabrina Eastwood, and when I was a little fresh person at Santa Cruz, I'd never heard of Tom Lehrer. Somehow somebody told me, hey, there's a scholarship audition. So I got in, although in that sentence last night, I might have even been at some piano. I remember him sitting there saying, giving us instructions about how we should audition. And I had prepared from high school the song Nothing from the chorus line, rather long. And so in his introduction, he said, okay, here's how it's going to go. And you should do a short song. For example, you should not do a song like Nothing. He's like, yeah, do it. I got in, and as other people have said, I mean, lifelong friends and wonderful thing.
Yeah.
One thing I'm going to do, class of 83, please stand up. Every girl can do.
Is there anyone here from 1990?
Nah.
We had them. So I know we have 75. What's the latest that we have? Do you have 89? 88?
87.
All right. It's 1975 too.
Get a little more serious, and I want to say that our dear friend Angie Christman, who's back here with her lovely husband Jim Christman, who happen to be neighbors of mine because I still live in Santa Cruz and I'm delighted to their neighbors. Angie and Jim are the most wonderful people, and Angie, many of you know her well, was very close to Tom forever and ever and ever. So I always got to kind of dance along, and she'd call me up and say, Sabrina, Tom's in town. You want to have lunch on Tuesday? And I'd be like, sure, let's do it. And so Tom would take us to lunch, and we'd do this every year or so for many years. And he would always say, I'm telling you a story this last night, he'd always say that he'd received a royalty check from somewhere or other, and that's what was paying for our lunch. But anyway, one year Angie said, it's Tom's 80th birthday. Let's make dinner for him. And so my husband Russell and I and Angie brought stuff to Tom's apartment and made dinner for his 80th birthday. And I don't even remember what we made or what we did or anything. It was just lovely. And I so appreciate Angie concluding me in that for so many years, because I really got to ride your coattails. So anyway, that was how I got to know Tom a little better. And because I wasn't familiar with him before, I didn't have that whole star thing. And so I think he kind of appreciated having somebody in his orbit who didn't give a crap about things, celebrity. So anyway, thank you everybody.
Okay, is there anything else left out that they need to come up and tell the story? We don't want to bring animals. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Allison. I was in class of 76 with my other three compatriots who are also here. In listening to stories and talking to people and everything else like that, I'm really struck by one thing about Tom. I'm gonna get a little emotional here, but some of us are actors, some of us are singers, or some of us are trying to be singers. Some of us were in different kinds of studies altogether and just loved music and musical theater and just wanted to be part of this kind of amazing environment. When I auditioned, give you a little backstory. When I was in high school, I auditioned for Guys and Dolls and I wanted to play Adelaide. And I didn't get cast as Adelaide, and my parents weren't very happy with my grades that year, so they had decided that if I didn't get cast as Adelaide, I wasn't going to be able to do Guys and Dolls at all. Mm-hmm. So they said, no, you can't do it. And parents tell your kids, they have kids, don't ever take away the thing that you cut up what's the best. That's the kind of good grades. And it turned out that after they cast everybody, they decided they were going to double cast Adelaide, and I would have been Adelaide. Well, they told me I would have been Adelaide, but I wasn't I had said I can't be in the show, so okay, too bad. So when I auditioned for Tom, I sang Adelaide's Lament. Long song, yes. So that was before he told you don't have a long song. And when we were casting the year, I got cast. We were cast the year. He came up to me and he said, "Allison," he says, "I want to ask you a question." He said, "I really want to cast you as Belle Quatrine in Little Me." He says, "But I think maybe you really want to play Adelaide." And I said, "Yeah, I really need to play Adelaide." He's like, "Okay, we'll do that." He said, "You're also going to be Dainty June." I'm like, "Dainty June?" And he's like, "You can be a Dainty June, it'll be fun." But that's the thing, is that he was so generous. Mm-hmm. And he looked at people and kind of saw what they needed. And they needed sometimes to be cast in a role that maybe they thought they weren't a singer, but they got a great singing role because they were a singer and they didn't know they were a singer. Or that they were brand new to theater and they'd never really done anything like that. And he gave you opportunities to stretch and to do things that you never thought maybe you could do, even if you were a theater person. He just really very quickly recognized who we were and what we needed and how we could be bigger than we started. And I just want to really recognize that. I think he had a real gift of seeing people and seeing us, these 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old students that really needed what he had to give us. So thank you, Tom.
You're moving on, but I need to leave everyone that you're struggling about. So, and Carol, thank you. This has been beyond my wildest expectations. The best.
So we are now going to transition over.
We just need to plug in Chris's laptop because it's going to die. So give us a second. We're going to transition. They're going to start a sing-along in just a moment. So I have to be somewhere else. But I wanted to make sure that Chris's laptop, which is at 13% battery, wasn't going to poop out on you all. Ta-da! Yeah.
Thank you, Luke.
I'll mention to everyone here, since you folks aren't the folks who are there live, that shortly after Tom passed, people I know here held a memorial where we sang the entire Tom songbook, which took about 2 hours. And after this year, it's my intention to do that around April 9th every year moving forward. If any of you are ever in the vicinity of Amherst, Massachusetts around this time of year, you can find me and let me know.
Here's how they do it now.